Hello again. Welcome to our study, The Coat of Many Colors. Yeah, that's Joseph there. We're going to do this in two sessions, chapter 1 and chapter 2. This is in addition to a study that we're doing now. We're going to do probably 12 sessions on it called Escaping the Trap. And that's also on the channel. And every week we'll do another session and it will be posted on the channel. So this is a kind of an addition to that. We're going to talk about offenses. We're going to talk about stumbling blocks, but we're going to talk about this fancy coat, the coat of many colors. And again, this is going to be taken from Genesis chapter 37 all the way through chapter 50. So we're going to cover a lot of territory, but we're going to concentrate on this fancy coat. So before we see the coat, let's go to prayer. Father, once again, thank you for this incredible word. Thank you for what we learn from these few chapters. Bless us in our endeavors to not only understand it, but to apply it so we can serve you in a greater way till that day you take us home. So, the coat of many colors, chapter number 1. Well, it's the story of Joseph and this coat that has many colors to it. Now, we start this in Genesis chapter 37, verse 3. Now, Israel, now that is Jacob. Israel becomes Jacob, or he's given that name Jacob. Israel, or Jacob, loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. Okay, well, the question is, why? Why did he make him a coat? And why is he love all of his children less than he does Joseph? Now, if you've got brothers and sisters, a lot of you are going to say, well, you know, mom liked you best, or my sister could do no wrong, or my brother got away with murder. I understand. I get that. I understand. But he loved Joseph more than all his children. And we know from the word, he had 11 brothers and one sister. So for dad to single one person out, something's going on. So why did he do that? Why did he make him a coat of many colors? Well, it might not have been that elaborate, it might not have been that fancy, but nonetheless, it was a coat, probably not nearly as well made as that is, but nonetheless, there's a coat, and there it is, and it's got, as the text says, many colors. Well, according to the scholars, many of them, the coat of many colors was called a kameez. It's called other things as well, but it's called a kameez. Now, this was worn by the tribal or the family leaders. In other words, Jacob had a coat of many colors himself. And this was a rank, it was a position of authority. This is the coat you wore when you were the leader of the family. The only other person allowed to wear one of these was the heir apparent. Now, ordinarily, that was the oldest son. Things change in this particular circumstance. See, it was customary for the oldest son to receive the majority of the father's inheritance, sometimes a double portion, depending. Well, this often left the other siblings with less than favorable amounts. So if you had like 3, 4, 5 brothers, you were down there on the bottom of the pole, you might not have got very much, if anything at all. Some of you are saying, yeah, I understand that. My brother got it all. Okay, I understand. But it was customary for the oldest son to receive the majority of his father's inheritance. Well, not only was he to receive a great inheritance, but also the position of leadership of the family. Now, that came with privileges as well as the responsibilities, and everybody had to listen to the leader of the family. Now, many of you probably got just that, Uncle Bob or Uncle George or Uncle somebody or another, that just happens to be the leader of the group. Everybody goes to him for either permission or advice or whatever. But now there's an issue. You see, not only was he to receive a great inheritance and the position of leadership within the family, but he had privileges and he had responsibilities that go with it. Well, therein comes the problem. Joseph was the 11th of 12 sons. Now, he had one sister. Her name was Dinah. But he's got 10 older brothers, and he's got one little brother that is probably just an adolescence at this point in time. So Joseph is right now, according to many scholars, around 17 years old, and all of a sudden Dad gives him the coat. Said, hey, here, you're going to be my heir. You're going to have the coat of many colors. Now, he's got 10 brothers that are not happy, as you can imagine, especially the oldest one, who should have gotten that coat himself. But no, the son of his old age, his favorite son, got the coat. You can see where the problems are going here. Well, there's a picture of what may be the coat. You see, Isaac has two sons. We're going to go back a little history right now. Isaac has two sons with his wife Rebekah. The firstborn is Esau. The secondborn was Jacob. Now, Jacob tricks his brother Esau into giving him his firstborn rights. Sells him a bowl of stew, and he gives up his firstborn rights because he was hungry. Silly. He did not honor, he did not take it of great value. And of course, there's a lot we could talk about that. Well, to save himself from his brother's wrath, he books it. He leaves and he goes to his uncle Laban's house. And there he's going to stay for several years. Well, Laban has two daughters. The oldest is Leah. The younger one is Rachel. Now, the word tells us that Rachel was beautiful. Leah had tender eyes. So Rachel was beautiful and Leah wasn't. Let's just leave it right there. Now, Jacob agrees to work 7 years for Rachel to be his wife. Okay, 7 years to work for a wife. Okay, that was pretty common back then. Well, Laban tricks him and he ends up marrying Leah. Now, I don't understand this, how you wake up the next morning and you pull the covers back and it's not Rachel, it's Leah. Oh, wait a minute, what happened? Well, he was tricked by Laban and now he agrees to work another 7 years for Rachel. Now, remember, Rachel is the love of his life, not Leah. Okay, so you see the significance of all this craziness going on. It gets worse. Well, there we see the code again. Well, the love of his life is Rachel. However, God had not allowed her to have children. Now, for a woman during those days to not have children, they oftentimes consider her to be under divine reproach. In other words, she did something wrong and God is punishing her. But see, for a woman at that time, the only thing they wanted to do was have children, and the more, the merrier. Well, her sister Leah has 7 children, six boys and 1 girl. Now, additionally, the handmaids of Rachel and Leah, these were their maids, they both have 2 kids each. Well, that was customary at that time for a woman who was not able to have kids, as Rachel was, to give her husband her handmaid, and he would go into the handmaid and have children with her. And when that child was born, then she could give that child to her mistress, and it became her child. It sounds strange, and yet anybody who's had a kid or maybe adopt a kid, there's just nothing like having one of your own. Nothing like giving birth to one of your own. Well, eventually, God will open the womb of Rachel, and she will give birth to a son whose name is Joseph. Now, she'll give birth again to a son named Benjamin. Unfortunately, Rachel will die at his birth. So here we've got Joseph now. And he also has a little brother by the name of Benjamin, and his mom never knew him because she passed away at his birth. So now we've got Joseph, number 11, and Benjamin, number 12. Now, these 12 brothers became the tribes of Israel. But it gets a little bit more complex than that. Well, the 12 sons of Jacob become the 12 leaders of the tribes of Israel. And according to the scholars, Joseph is the firstborn son of his favorite wife, Rachel. Okay, I have a challenge with the word favorite wife. I only have one. I've had her for almost 50 years. And okay, yeah, she's my favorite. But understand something, if you've had more than one wife, your best retirement, keep your first one. So he is the firstborn son of his favorite wife. You see, Leah wasn't his favorite. He had her as a wife, but she wasn't the one he worked 7 years for. Rachel he worked 14 years for. So once again, Rachel was his favorite wife. So therefore, he wanted him, Joseph, to be his heir because she was his firstborn son. All right. So therefore, he gives Joseph the coat of many colors. Now, this incensed his brothers to the point they refused to even speak to their little brother. And here's what we understand. Jealousy, incredibly powerful emotion. It can hurt you badly, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and many other ways as well. When we look at this text in Genesis chapter 37, verse 3 all the way down to 11, highlight a few passages here. Now Israel, now that's Joseph, loved Joseph more than all his children, but he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. Now Israel, that he becomes Jacob, if you will. So it reads like this. Now Israel, or Jacob, loved Joseph more than all of his children, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Imagine that. Verse 5. Right about this time, Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and as a result, his brothers hated him so much more. And what he did is he's just kind of rubbing it in, if you will. I'm the favorite, and you're not. I've heard that before. Jumping at verse number 6, let me tell you about this dream I had, he said. We were tying sheaves together out in the middle of the field, when so my sheaf stood up erect, when your sheaves gathered around it bowed down to my sheaf. Okay. At this, his brother said, do you really think you're going to rule us or lord over us? Do you really think that? So they hated him even more because of his dreams and his interpretation of them. See, they hate this kid more and more and more. Remember, he's got 10 older brothers. The oldest one is probably 35, 36, something of that nature. And so we jump down to verse number 9. But then he had another dream, and he proceeded to tell his brothers about that one too. I had another dream, he said. The sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowing down before me. Verse 10. When Joseph told his father about this, his father rebuked him and asked him, what kind of dream is that? Will I, your mother, and your brothers really come to you and bow down to the ground in front of you? Is that really going to happen? Do you really think so? Verse 11. As a result, his brothers became more envious of him. They hated him. But his father kept thinking about this. Now, what's going to happen? Jacob very, very easily is going to act out a prophecy. Let's continue. Well, there we see Joseph in the middle, and several brothers were trying to take the coat off of him, or maybe just trying to take him apart, whatever you want to say about that. They were incensed at the fact that he was lording over them, and he was only a kid, maybe 16, 17 years old. So you can see what's going on there. I'm going to go back to the text here. Again, Genesis 37, starting at verse 12. We'll go down to verse number 14. Sometime later, his brothers left to tend their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel, that again is Jacob, instructed Joseph, your brothers are tending the flock in Shechem. Come here, because I'm going to send you to them. Here am I, he responded. Go and see how things are with your brothers. Israel ordered him. And see how things are with the flock. Bring back a report for me. Then he sent Joseph from the valley of Hebron. So now he's going to go check on his 10 brothers. Now this is an artist painting, several centuries old, and it's amazing just how well they did back then. But there, that guy all the way to the right, that white skinny looking kid with the something wrapped around his midsection. You see around his ankle there's a rope, and then you see down there at the bottom there's a pit. That's where he's going. He's going in the pit. He's going in the cistern, if you will. Now his brothers are saying, okay, look, we got to deal with this. Had enough of this kid. We had enough of his dreams. We had enough of his cockiness, enough of his arrogance, enough of him lording over us. He's our snot-nosed little brother, and I guess you get to guess the message. Going to verse number 19. Look, they said, here comes the dream master. Come on, let's kill him and throw him in one of the cisterns. Then we'll report that some wild animal devoured him and wait to see what becomes of his dreams. Now Reuben heard about it. He tried to save Joseph from their plot. Let's not do this any killing, Reuben told him, and no bloodshedding either. And instead, let's toss him into the cistern. That way they're out in the wilderness. Don't lay a hand on him. You see, Reuben intended to free him and return him to his father. At least he had one that was kind of sort of in his court. Verse 23. As it was, when Joseph arrived, there his brothers were. They stripped off the tunic that his dad had given him. That is, the richly embroidered tunic that he was wearing. They seized him and tossed him into the cistern. But the cistern was empty. Otherwise, he may have drowned, because there was no water in it. So now he's got a rope around his ankles and he's lowered down into the cistern, which is probably 10, 20 feet deep. We don't know. Well, there it is. The coat of many colors is no longer on Joseph, and their brothers got it. So now what do they do? Jumping down to verse number 25. After this, while they were seated, eating their food, they looked around and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with camels carrying spices, balm, and myrrh, and they're going to sell it down in Egypt. And Judah suggested to his brothers, where's the profit in just killing our brother and shedding his blood? Come on, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. That way we won't have laid our hands on him. After all, he is our brother. He's our own flesh. So Judah's brothers listened to him. As the Midianite merchants were passing through, they extracted Joseph from the cistern and sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who then took Joseph down to Egypt. So now he's sold as the price of a slave. That was 20 pieces of silver. So now what? Jumping down to verse 31. So they took Joseph's coat, slaughtered a young goat, dipped the coat in the blood, and then they stretched out the richly embroidered tunic to dry and brought it to their father. We found this, they reported. Look at it and see if this is or isn't Joseph's tunic. Examining it, he cried out, "It's my son's tunic. A wild animal has no doubt torn Joseph to pieces." So you got 10 brothers standing there looking at one another like, okay, Dad bought it. What do we do? Keep your mouth shut. Let's just let it go. He's dead already. He's down there in Egypt, and they probably already killed him, but that's okay. We got 20 pieces of silver. Let's see, that's 2 pieces of silver apiece. We're good to go. Not yet. Verse 34, so Jacob tore his clothes, dressed himself in sackcloth, and then mourned many days for his son, and all his sons and daughters. Now, daughters is plural. It's interesting. He only had one daughter, as the text tells us. Now, either he had other daughters that we don't know of, or these may be the daughters-in-law. Well, they showed up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He kept saying, "Leave me alone. I'll go down to the next world, still mourning for my son." So Joseph's father wept for him. Verse 36. Meanwhile, down in Egypt, the Midianites sold Joseph to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's court officials, who was also commander-in-chief of the imperial guards. And you can imagine the sight where they showed Joseph the coat of many colors. Joseph is no longer there, and they show Jacob his coat, and Dad believes it. And they had to hide that. They had to hide that deception for decades. Difficult to do. Well, see, Joseph is sold into slavery and will eventually spend some 13 years in prison. Now, there's other scholars that have different ideas to how long he was there and how long this happened, that happened. Bottom line is he went into a prison convicted of something that he was innocent of doing. And again, you could pick this story up from Genesis 37 all the way through Genesis 50. And I suggest you do. It's a fascinating story. So he's sold into slavery, and he eventually spends some time in prison. By the time he was released from prison and appointed as head over Egypt, he became what we would term the prime minister. Joseph was 30 years of age, so he'd been there a long time, 10, 15 years. Scholars differ on how long he was there. Therefore, 13 years passed from the time Joseph was sold by his brothers to the time he left prison. Well, after many years of various trials and troubles, he correctly interprets Pharaoh's dream as symbolizing 7 years of bountiful harvest followed by 7 years of famine. 7 good years, 7 bad years. We find this in Genesis chapter 41. Well, see, his wisdom given by God is rewarded by elevating him to the second most powerful position in Egypt. We get that from verses 39 through 46. So now there has to be some put together the family, as they say. Well, Joseph will reunite with his family. And again, this story covers about 13 chapters. The entire story is covered in Genesis, and that's the end of this session. Oh, wait a minute. We still haven't talked about the coat. Guess what? That's coming up. Our next session, we're going to talk about this fancy coat and just exactly what it means for you and for me. So be blessed, be safe. We'll see you on the next study.